And if I told you that Ferrari discovered in Mugello, almost by accident, that his SF25 could be the final weapon they were looking for? And what was Lewis Hamilton in a secret test, who unleashed chaos in Maranello? Stay, because this could change everything we knew about Ferrari in 2025. In silence, without cameras, without fanfare. This is how Ferrari carried out a filming session in Mugello that, without looking for it, became one of the most revealing events of the whole season. Under the regulated pretext of a filming day, where the 200-kilometer limit must meet demonstration tires and without altering engine parameters, the Scuderia organized a double day. In the morning they used the SF23 for correlation test, and in the afternoon, the really important thing came. The SF25 appeared with key modifications, especially in the rear suspension, and with Lewis Hamilton at the wheel. From the outside, everything seemed routine. But engineers knew that Mugello was not any circuit. High side load curves such as Arrabbiata 1 and 2, combined with aggressive slopes and complicated braking areas, make this route an ideal tool to stress components of the chassis that in other scenarios are barely altered. That was the key. Ferrari needed a place where the limitations of SF25 came to light without filters. And what if they did? From the first round of rounds, telemetry began to show an unexpected pattern. The minimum speed sustained by Hamilton in critical curves such as Arrabbiata 2 was 6 km/h upper compared to his best previous records. But that was not the most surprising. He did it without increasing the wear of the plate of the flat background. That iron is critical because if it erodes more than allowed, the car is automatically disqualified. This meant that Hamilton was carrying the car faster, with more grip and less wear, a combination that had not yet been seen in Ferrari this year. When the data went to the analysis team, everything accelerated. In line, the height variation of the rear axle, which normally fluctuates in more than 4 mm due to the effects of the rebound and aerodynamics, was drastically reduced to only 1.4 mm. This figure was so unexpected that the first impulse was to check if the sensors were properly calibrated. There was no error. Everything indicated that the redesign of the upper kneecap in the new geometry of the suspension arm, a piece that had moved closer to the crankcase to improve the vertical response of the car, was working much better than anticipated. And what ended up leaving the technical staff speechless was thermal stability in the rear brakes. Under normal test conditions with demonstration gums, it is almost impossible to maintain constant temperatures due to the lack of grip and real demand. But Hamilton managed to maintain the thermal delta within plus or minus 12 degrees Celsius. That could only mean one thing. The SF25 had found a balance that had not been achieved during any race weekend until that moment. The reaction in Maranello did not take long. Vasseur, who was following the data in real time from the Ferrari headquarters, was literally paralyzed. Not only because Hamilton had shown a very high technical level with a car still in development, but because he had done it under the most limited conditions possible. What had been searching for months on the official track was revealed in a secondary session, outside the media focus and without pressure. The immediate order was to open an internal technical investigation. Not to look for mistakes, but to understand why these results had not manifested before. This session, without pretensions of revolution, ended up becoming a turning point. It was no longer if the SF25 could gain races, but to understand how much hidden potential it was still not exploited. The precision of Hamilton at the wheel, its ability to translate sensations into useful data, and Mugello's perfect scenario, combined to deliver Ferrari the first true ray of hope of the season. To understand why this test was so shocking, you must first return to the beginning of everything, the birth of SF25. The car was conceived with a huge illusion, not only by the arrival of Lewis Hamilton to Maranello, but because the first data of the wind tunnel pointed to a concept with real potential. Ferrari trusted to have solved the chronic ills of his predecessors. However, a few great prizes were enough to reveal an uncomfortable truth. The SF25 was extremely difficult to configure, with an operational window so narrow that it touched the unfeasible. That term operational window quickly became the center of all technical discussions within Ferrari. It refers to the exact range of conditions in which the car offers its best performance. In the case of SF25, that window was so specific that any deviation, however minimal either in track temperature, car height, asphalt type or wind speed, instantly degraded the performance. This resulted in a frustrating pattern. The car shone on Saturdays in classification where conditions could refine millimeter, but it crumbled on Sundays, when variability and natural were obligate a much greater margin of tolerance. After the Austria Grand Prix, the team decided to implement a new soil specification. In principle, that improvement seemed to work well. The wind tunnel had predicted better airflow control under the car, and track data confirmed that aerodynamic behavior improved. But the engineers recognized something crucial. The real problem was not under the ground, but behind it. The rear suspension was not able to manage the so-called longitudinal rebound, a subtle but destructive oscillation that occurred when passing braking and that compromised both stability and tire wear. Here comes the decision to develop a pull rod rear suspension, a less common architecture than the traditional pushrod system, but which offers specific advantages in terms of center of gravity, packaged, and the most relevant, more linear vertical response. This type of suspension, used successfully by teams such as Red Bull in previous seasons, has the ability to reduce the pitching or front balancing of the car. But implementing it is not as simple as changing pieces. It requires redesigning all the assembly geometry, recalibrating the bruises, and adapting the behavior of the flat background so that it works in harmony with the new dynamic loads. The test in Mugello was the first time that Ferrari put this version with the new suspension in semi-real conditions. And what they found exceeded all the projections. Not only were there improvements in braking and acceleration behavior, but the car seemed to have found a new comfort zone, a sweet spot, where it could operate more predictably. The thermal stability in the brakes, observed in the Hamilton data, was a direct reflection of this new harmony. When the car stops oscillating and maintaining the constant height, the entire brake system works with greater consistency, something essential to avoid unbalances in each curve. This new balance was not just the hardware result. It was also the reflection of a better understanding of how Hamilton adapts its piloting to the technical limitations of the car. The British, known for his extreme sensitivity in the feedback, knew how to pilot in the fair limit to stress the key areas of the car without breaking the harmony of the whole. That precision is what allowed Ferrari to draw such clear conclusions despite the restrictions of a filmed day. Why did these improvements not manifested in simulations? What were they interpreting badly in digital models? The answer is in the erratic correlation phenomenon between wind, simulator, and track tunnel. In ideal conditions, everything should fit. But when the virtual model is not able to reproduce certain dynamic conditions such as the longitudinal rebound in a quick downstream curve such as Casanova Savelli in Mugello, the precision that an elite team needs to make strategic decisions need. Ferrari is now at a strategic crossroads that could define not only the rest of its 2025 season, but also its immediate future in Formula One. The unexpected performance of the SF25 during the Mugello test has opened a gap between what the team had planned to focus its resources almost exclusively to the development of the 2026 car and what the data is now shouting clearly. Competitive, even winner, if adequate technical attention is given. The engineers now face a fundamental question. Is it more valuable to continue investing in a car that will run within a year or redirect efforts towards a car that, with the correct adjustments, could return Ferrari to the fight for victories this year? It is not only a technical dilemma, but also political and economic. Because immediate success not only influences points but also in the internal mood, the public narrative of the team. From a technical point of view, betting on the SF25 based on Mugello's data is not an illusion. The new rear suspension not only resolved part of the rebound problems, but also modified the way the car interacts with the flat background, allowing a more stable load distribution in rapid curves. In addition, the reduction in the height variation of the rear train has had a positive domino effect. Less variability in vertical loads implies a more predictable behavior in each phase of the curve, which in turn allows you to refine the tuning more efficiently. In other words, Ferrari can now work on a stronger platform. But here another dilemma layer arises: the internal management of parallel development. Ferrari cannot simply leave the 2026 car. Technical regulations will change in that year, and all teams have already started working on these radically new concepts. Devar resources between both cars necessarily implies commitments. If they invest more in the SF25, they will lose strategic advantage over teams such as McLaren or Mercedes, which continue to push hard towards 2026. But if they do not, they could miss a golden opportunity to save a season that seemed to escape between the fingers. In addition, external pressure begins to notice. Fans, media, and even some members of the paddock already talk about the Mugello test as the day Ferrari discovered that he had a winning car and did not know. These types of narratives are dangerous if they are not managed well, because they create a public expectation that can become against the team if it does not translate into immediate results. This secret test, invisible to the general public, can be remembered as the turning point of the 2025 campaign. Or it can fade in history as a wasted opportunity like so many others. The decision is in the hands of Vasseur and his team. But the truth is that after Mugello, Ferrari can no longer say that he does not know what his car is capable. And once you know the truth, ignoring it isn't choice.